Hello, happy Halloween, and welcome to the most accurate podcast here at 4 for 4 Fantasy Football, heading into week 9 on, as we record this, Friday morning, October 31st. Spooky? John, do you have any exciting Halloween plans today before we get to this weekend of football?
Well, I'm trying to lose weight, and my wife put out a big bowl of bite-sized candy on the island. I'm like, "Why is this out here?" And she said, "Well, last year we had trick-or-treaters before I got home, and you were like, there's trick-or-treaters here. We don't have any candy out. So I'm putting this out in case that happens. I'll put it in the other room so you don't have to look at it all day. But those little bite-sized candies are so like the little Reese's peanut butter cups and the almond joys.
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
just calling my name from the other room right now.
Yep. You can sneak one of those in, doesn't make a difference, then maybe another one. Good stuff. All right. We will get into a bunch of stuff for week 9. Before we do that, TNF last night was not that interesting. The Ravens won 28-6. The Dolphins largely looked very bad, and it resulted, well, I don't know if I should say it resulted, but the team parted ways this morning with their GM, Chris Greer, not yet the head coach. We'll see if that happens. But for now, it's just the GM. Don't know how much that affects fantasy down the stretch. As for what happened in the game, Derrick Henry was very good. 19 carries for 119 yards. It seems like he is very much back on the horse after a slow stretch in the middle of the season. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's return helped with that quite a bit. Jackson threw 4 touchdowns. Didn't need to throw many yards because they were ahead for the entire game, basically, despite the fact that the Ravens were in it for a long time. But the Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. Mark Andrews caught 2 touchdowns. Is there any? I don't know if there's any takeaways here. Do you have any takeaways moving forward for the Ravens besides Derrick Henry should actually be good?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the first half of the game, and I was keeping an eye on the score. I had the Keaton Mitchell over 3.5 carries, and I didn't get that 4th carry until like the fourth quarter. I was talking with Connor about that, and he's like, "They keep running Henry," and I go, "I think they're trying to get him to 100 yards," and then they finally got him to 100 yards. And I paired that with the Zay Flowers and Jalen Waddle combined over 133, which also hit, so I was happy about that. Yeah, what are the takeaways? Well, Mark Andrews, 2 for 22 and 2 touchdowns, like just about as efficient as you can get. He's happy that Lamar Jackson is back. Low volume, as you mentioned, 23 pass attempts, 204 yards, 8.9 yards per attempt. I think the takeaway, that maybe the main takeaway for the Ravens is that the defense might be better, might be getting back to kind of we've always had with the Ravens a pass funnel, it seems. They've had some stingy pass defenses as well, but they're always been really good against the run. And then people have to pass on them, and so they're kind of a pass funnel. This year, they've just been bad, period. But, maybe as they're getting a little bit healthier, it's funny that the Dolphins were not able to really move the ball much after what they did to Atlanta last week. I mean, I think that Miami-Atlanta score really sticks out, like what happened or what's going on in the NFL, where you think that Atlanta's kind of cruising, and then Miami just kind of chews them up, and then turn around. They can't do anything against the Ravens, but that also might be a weird Thursday night football thing as well. But some teams prepare better for Thursday night and others don't.
Also, the Falcons lost 30-0 to the Panthers at one point this year, so they just seem like a team that maybe doesn't play up to the competition or something, or plays down to it. Worth noting, by the way, the Ravens, if anyone remembers last year, their defense was awful, particularly against the pass for a long time. Then they had their bye, I think it was around week 10, and they shifted what Kyle Hamilton was doing, and it completely changed the defense, and they were one of the best defenses over the rest of the season. It was wild. And it seems like maybe something kind of similar has happened here. They made a trade for Alohi Gilman from the Chargers that allowed them, they're talking about this in the broadcast a lot, to move Kyle Hamilton, help the run game, and it looked like it was doing that in this game, and it looks like they might be a little fixed. So maybe a little cold water on the stream everyone against the Ravens defense thing. We'll have to keep an eye on that. On the other side of the ball, playing against that defense, the Dolphins were like they were just okay, but didn't score any points. Tua ended up with 261 yards. Waddle caught 6 passes for 82 yards. He was, heavily involved. And Devon Achane was good, especially in PPR, because he was heavily used in the receiving game, but no one scored. And so all in all, it was just kind of meh. Rest of the season, Achane great, Waddle great, nothing else playable in this offense, basically.
Yeah, basically, Malik Washington was getting a little bit of hype, love this week. Ended up with 3 for 48 on 3 targets and 13 yards rushing. So it's like kind of a decent, spot start, but not really going to be trustworthy. I think maybe the biggest story for the Dolphins is Greg Dulcich finally capitalizing on some of his hype from several years ago. 5 for 49 and 5 targets. Could be interesting if it keeps up. He is an athletic player, just never really capitalized on his athleticism in Denver, and now he's trying to fill in for the Darren Waller, who was trying to fill in for Jonnu Smith. So who knows? Maybe something gets going there, but it's this Miami offense has just not been consistent or trustworthy this year, and the only players are Achane and Waddle that should be locked into lineups.
Yeah. All righty. Not much else to say about this game, so we can move on to the news. Before we do, quick reminder, end of show, there will be a Q&A. Any questions you guys have, drop them in the chat. We will get to any and all of the ones that we can, particularly anything about big rest of season stuff, trade questions, anything that's not just a start sit, because you can answer that with John's rankings. There is a big piece of news from this morning, but before we get to that, very quickly, need to touch on something from last week, because we haven't recorded since last week. Cam Scattaboo, ankle injury. It was gruesome. It was sad. All of the fantasy community was just ripped by it, as was Jackson Dart and all the New York Giants players, and I'm sure Scattaboo himself. He will be out for the entirety of the season. It's going to take him several months to recover. In his absence, 2 questions. Tyrone Tracy becomes what? Because as many might remember, he was largely projected to be the starter at one point in this offseason before Scattaboo took over, and Tracy had an injury that allowed for that to happen to some degree. And then also, does this affect Jackson Dart and the rest of the offense in any significant way, given what Scattaboo had been bringing to the Giants?
To answer your first question first, RB22, Tyrone Tracy, rest of season. This is based off of what he did late last year. From week 5 on, he averaged 16.4 touches for 81 total yards, 0.46 touchdowns per game. He was good. That was good for RB16 overall in that span, and RB21 on a per game basis. He's not an electric playmaker, but he can handle the touches and get you some good production from those touches. And in fantasy, we have to follow the touches. I think he, waivers are already over, but he was like, how often in week 9 are you going to get a solid RB2 off the waiver wire? Like he was if you have any sort of running back issues, empty the chamber type fab bid. This specific week, the 49ers are a nice matchup. So I wrote him up for sneaky starts. If you want any more detail on that, check out the article. So that RB21 per game basis is kind of driving where I have him, ranked. It's a little tricky because you have guys like Omarion Hampton still, waiting to come back, and he has more value when he comes back, I think, than Tyrone Tracy. But, I have him in that Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, Rico Dowdle, David Montgomery sort of tier. And he could, emerge from that and be a little bit higher and get into that Jaylen Warren, Chase Brown, DeAndre Swift area, because the offense could be a little bit better with Jackson Dart than it was last year, and things could be, a little more productive and maybe more touchdowns. But I think from a trade standpoint, or like, who am I going to cut to pick him up, that I think RB22 is about where I'm at right now.
Okay, it's pretty solid. Now the news from this morning. Travis Hunter was placed on IR with a knee injury that I believe he suffered in practice, and very quickly apparently turned into quite serious. So he will be gone for at least a month, which is really unfortunate given the way he had been breaking out. The news we had heard out of Duval that he was maybe going to get wide receiver run, but he will be out. Brian Thomas Jr. is limited right now with the injuries he suffered the last time they played. So, is there some interest here in Parker Washington or De'Ami Brown or someone else, or is it just no one for you in Jacksonville and everybody's a mess?
I guess a non-contact knee injury, according to Jeff Mueller, our PT. I'm just scrolling his page to see if it's what it is. But if it's a 4-game thing, it's not. This is not a torn ACL. This is not a season ender.
No.
So what this sounds like to me is probably a knee sprain, or they're going to clean up meniscus. I had 2 surgeries in college where they trimmed my meniscus, and it took 3 weeks to get back, 4 weeks really to play. So maybe that's what's going on. But the fact that they ruled him out that quickly could indicate something a little more serious. Like they're thinking, oh, it's going to be 6 games, but we'll see. So I've moved him down in our rest of season rankings. It's really sad because this is the first week in a long time that I was really excited about playing him, given his production and usage prior to the bye. And then you have he had a big game and played like 87% of the snaps. And then they had the bye, and then you're looking for that rookie bump, potentially post-bye bump. And now we're, talking about De'Ami Brown and Parker Washington. So Parker Washington played ahead of De'Ami Brown last game. So I think what's going to happen, I think what happened was Hunter took a lot of De'Ami Brown snaps. So you're going to end up with Thomas, if they're all healthy, you're going to end up with Thomas, Brown, and Washington on the field a lot. I think De'Ami Brown and Parker Washington become interesting dart throws, but I don't have any level of confidence as to which one is going to produce in any given week because talent-wise, they're kind of a wash for me. I do think this sort of raises Brian Thomas's floor if he's healthy, because he might see an extra couple targets per game. But he is limited last time I checked here with a shoulder injury. Tim Patrick is also going to be the wide receiver 4 probably. He's got a groin injury. He's been limited the last 2 games. De'Ami Brown was limited on Wednesday and full on Thursday. So maybe he's getting closer to full health. But, to me, it's like Brown and Washington, they're kind of like DFS dart throw type players where maybe you get something out of them, but don't count on
it. Sounds about right. And Brian Thomas Jr. cracks wide receiver 2 range with this now, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, I already had him at wide receiver 16, I think, this week. Okay. So, and I think rest of season he's been kind of bouncing around that 16 to 24 range, just because how he's been playing. I think I got him at 24 right now, right below Chris Olave and ahead of Devonta Smith.
Okay. All righty. Over in New England, Ramondre Stevenson did not practice yesterday. Have not yet seen today's report, if there is one, with a toe injury. Those toe injuries tend to be very problematic, as we have seen often. And last week, now, I hesitate to point out anything that has happened in this backfield because none of it really seems to matter. But last week, TreVeyon Henderson looked very good with some opportunity that he got when Ramondre was banged up. Is this finally the window for TreVeyon Henderson to break out for the Patriots? Or there is some rumor that they're going to trade for someone, but that's probably not happening by this weekend. And also there is this guy, Terrell Jennings, that they brought up to play last week, got some snaps and touches. Who is that? I don't know, and I'm a Patriots fan. But if Stevenson misses time, how much hope do you have in TreVeyon Henderson? And I'm curious where you stand on him in general, because there are so many questions about him this time of year, whether he's reached drop range, whether people should be trading for him. Where do you fall?
Well, certainly I looked at the news today, and Ramondre is not at practice.
Okay.
So this sounds like it might be a turf toe injury, which can be limiting and can linger. So this might be the opening that TreVeyon Henderson needs. I don't know that he is going to take the job and run with it. I think they, if Ramondre Stevenson is healthy, he's going to have a sizable role. But in the short term, certainly it makes Travion Henderson a lot more interesting for Week 9 if Stevenson's not available. I mean, I don't think that's any sharp analysis there. Terrell Jennings is undrafted from Florida A&M. Just pulled up his profile at a player profiler. We don't have a lot of information on him. So I would think, it sort of depends on if the Patriots just want to have a committee, like that's just what they want to do and they're going to have one regardless. Or if it was really, we have two, running backs that we like, and we're just going to play the hot hand between the two of them. And then if one of them's out, we're going to, ride them. But I don't think that Travion Henderson's size or physical makeup really lends itself to being a workhorse, but he could be a 15 to 17 touch back in the short term with Stevenson sideline. That's sort of where I would have him in the RB2 ranks if Stevenson sits this week, which it looks like he will.
So he would be a legitimate fantasy starter for once if Stevenson is out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like confident. Like we know that he's going to get the 15 touches because we've seen it before. But this is what all signs are pointing to. If it's like the 8-ball, if you mix the magic 8-ball up, you get the all signs pointing to yes.
Yeah.
On that. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means all signs are pointing that way.
This team has ignored a lot of other signs with this backfield, but we'll see. Ricky Pearsall did not practice again this yesterday with the injury he's been dealing with now for several weeks. He is unlikely to play again this week. So that'll be the same crew it's been. Any big takeaways here? And where are you at with Pearsall rest of the season? Are you trying to acquire him at basement barrel prices for the hope that he's good when he comes back, if he comes back, or do you not really care?
I mean, I think he's intriguing. I've got him at wide receiver 38, and that really, like, looking at that feels really high given what's going on. Like, you're just expecting him to maybe come back this week, and then there's just no movement on his injury or any real update saying that he's going to be back soon. So he doesn't need to be that high. Maybe put him down by the Matthew Goldens and the Josh Downses of the world. Because when he played, you're like, oh, this is a good role for him, and boom, let's go. Now, Jawan Jennings is apparently getting healthy, according to Kyle Shanahan. That's a good indicator that maybe, okay, we're going to get some of Jennings that we thought we were going to get heading into the season, but he just got derailed by his contract situation and injuries. And we've also got a change of quarterback there, so everything's kind of up in the air. I do think that both Jennings and Kendrick Bourne are sneaky starts. I mean, I think Jennings is the better start because he's been getting pretty consistent targets the last couple of weeks, whereas Bourne had that really hot, he had back-to-back 142-yard games, and then has kind of cooled off because Jennings came back, and then now Kittle's back. So he's more of a dart throw, like, okay, I hope, he's going to be out there for 80% of the snaps. Let's hope he has a few catches, kind of a play. Whereas Jennings, you're feeling like, okay, maybe this is the week where he breaks out again. I mean, he had that one good game early in the year, and then it's been pretty quiet, but this is in a terrible spot for him.
Elsewhere on the annoying injuries that won't go away front, Terry McLaurin re-injured the quad that he had been dealing with for several weeks in the game that he played last Monday night, I believe it was. Looked very good. Wasn't incredibly involved, but looked very, very good on the targets he had. Made a couple amazing catches, scored a touchdown. He is now out again. This is just the worst. I don't know what's going on with him and his quad, but at this point, it's hard to trust him to ever come back healthy. I don't know where you stand on it, but if and when he does, I mean, what are you doing with him in fantasy right now, I guess is the question, if people have him on their roster and need to make moves.
Well, IR spot is the number one option if you have one.
Sure.
Bench is your number two option, but it sort of depends on how big your benches are. He said after the game that he was feeling optimistic about it, so that might lend itself to a 1 or 2 game absence, and he might still be useful. We're sort of waiting for new information on that, and like any sort of practicing and limited practices to see if he gets going again. Again, another holdout receiver who reported late, got his got his bag and is now struggling with injuries. So it's just something to keep in mind next year when this is happening to the next crop of holdouts, just to be kind of cautious with them, and maybe we shouldn't expect them to roll into camp and be in football shape.
Yeah. We might need a study on that from someone because it just seems to be the worst correlation every year. Isaiah Pacheco is not practicing. He has a knee injury that he is week to week with. Not too surprised to see him miss this game given that week to week designation he got. Picked up that knee injury last week. It did not look very comfortable when we saw it. The most interesting bit of news surrounding the situation is that the Chiefs are potentially in the trade market to pick up a running back. But for now, how high are you on Kareem Hunt and or Brashard Smith for this week? And then if you have any thoughts on a trade target, maybe someone they might pick up and what it could mean, I'd be curious to hear them. I know you love speculating with no evidence.
Yeah, you know that I don't like speculating with no evidence. Sarcasm there, sarcasm font. Kareem Hunt is an intriguing low-end RB2 for me, just due to the touchdown equity he has. We saw last week he has multi-touchdown upside with the goal line role that he has. He probably will see a few more carries as well, a few of Pacheco's carries. And Brashard Smith, we saw what he did in a secondary role when Hunt, I don't know, he sat out or he got injured, and he had a big touch day, Brashard Smith. So I think he's intriguing, especially in PPR formats, because he does have a pretty sizable receiving role. But I think it's going to be mainly Hunt first and second down, and then Brashard Smith getting some passing work and getting a few carries here and there. And if one of them gets hot, which it's more likely to get hot is maybe Brashard Smith because he's younger. It just seems like Hunt's days of getting hot are over. It's pretty much like 3 or 4 yards per carry, and that's what you're going to get. Maybe they kind of run with them a little bit. If Smith breaks a 20-yard run or something, he might see a bigger share of the workload than we were originally expecting. But I've got him ranked as like a low-end RB3 flex type, and Hunt ranked as a low-end RB2.
I have put it out into the universe that I think Breece Hall would be very fun there. He's very explosive, and they've been missing that explosion, but that's a very high target trade. You don't usually see players of that caliber traded. So mostly wishful thinking, but we'll see. Also, I don't really wish for the Chiefs to be good, for what it's worth. Anyways, other trade news. The Raiders are actively shopping Jacoby Myers. Now, this has kind of been the case all year because he asked for a trade before the year, and they have not been able to find a buyer. It seems like maybe the price they're asking for is too high. But since this is one of the ones where we know the team is trying to move them, do you have any takeaways for the guys that will be left behind? Maybe some Trey Tucker interest? And do you have any thoughts on places he might go that would make him decent or better than he's been?
Again, more speculation as to just asking about random teams that might want a receiver. Jacoby Myers is good. I don't know. He's not having a good season. I think he has a good reputation throughout the league and is a good route runner and was productive last year and can help some teams. Where he lands will determine his fantasy value. I will say that if he does get traded, the biggest winner is going to be Jack Beck, in my opinion, because of the slot role. He is a Matt Harmon favorite, great route runner, and he would be the one that would jump up, from wide receiver 4 snaps to wide receiver 3 snaps or 2 snaps, potentially. Dante Thornton is the other guy there, but he just hasn't really done a whole lot. I do like Trey Tucker. I've consistently had Trey Tucker ranked higher than consensus, starting him this week in a couple of leagues, just because he's been pretty big part of the offense the entire time. They did sign Tyler Lockett, so that's the one maybe hiccup for Jack Beck, is that if he's not able to sort of fend off the veteran leadership of Tyler Lockett with his old ball coach, Pete Carroll, then Lockett might be seeing snaps ahead of Beck. But he's the most intriguing one right now if Myers was moved. And I feel like they signed Lockett because Lockett got cut because they're expecting to lose Myers, probably, right? So This is all signaling that we're going to be moving forward with Tucker, Thornton, Beck, and Lockett as our top 4 receivers in some order.
Like it. Interesting. We will see. That deadline is Tuesday, by the way. So right after the week games end, we will see maybe some movement. Elsewhere, Tyler Shuck is set to start the rest of the year for New Orleans over Spencer Rattler. Do you care at all whatsoever?
I mean, I sort of think this is maybe bad for Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, who have been, and Juwan Johnson, who have been pretty productive with Spencer Rattler. I think Spencer Rattler's passing has been better than we all expected this summer when we were projecting these guys, and I just could not get on board with the passing attack. So the reason I say that it might be bad is that we have a known quantity right now with Spencer Rattler, who has done pretty decent or better than expected, and now we're going to this rookie who didn't do well enough in the preseason to beat out Spencer Rattler, but now they're going to go with him, and who knows what this means for anybody. Like it's just very much throwing everything up in the air from a known quantity standpoint to a mystery box type of a deal. And he's not like a prospect that is jumping off the page in any particular aspect. The 10 yards per game, 9.9 yards per game rushing is my rookie quarterback model for him, which is less than Spencer Rattler. So he doesn't have a whole lot of rushing floor. Just if you're looking at him from a fantasy standpoint, it's not too appealing. We'll have to see how he does.
Tough. And then a similar, I don't know if I should say similar, but another quarterback situation. JJ McCarthy is now healthy, and he will be back as the starter for Minnesota. Obviously, there was the long stretch with Carson Wentz. McCarthy was not very good to start the year, but and Wentz was looking like maybe he had a chance to take the job for a short period of time, but then he got horrendously banged up and is going to be out. So it should be McCarthy this week. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, I don't know that either has done quite what most people would have hoped to see from them. Certainly Jefferson hasn't. Do you see this being a boost to that at all, or maybe even a detriment, or is it another just kind of bad for bad swap?
Well, if you look at his game log, which is very brief, this JJ McCarthy game log, he had the comeback win, I believe it was in week 1 against Chicago, 143 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 7.15 yards per attempt, 25 yards rushing with a rushing touchdown. So he had 22.2 fantasy points in week 1. And I know the Vikings fans were excited. I remember seeing, it's him, capitalized, all him, him is all capitalized type tweets. Then he came back against Atlanta, who have proven to be a good pass defense. Tua Tagovailoa's 4 touchdown game notwithstanding. He was 11 for 21 for 158 yards, 2 interceptions against Atlanta at home, 7.5 yards per attempt in that game, 5 carries for 25 yards with a fumble. So do we really have enough to say that he didn't look good in his, week 2 was bad. Week 1 was, pretty good. They came back and won, and he had 22 fantasy points. So I would say if you're like looking at Justin Jefferson, you're looking at Jordan Addison, or if you're looking at JJ McCarthy sitting on your bench, like this is a reason for optimism. He's coming in week 9 against Detroit, 19th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. It's not a great matchup playing in Detroit. I mean, let's be honest, but they're probably going to have to throw a lot from a fantasy standpoint. It's pretty good. Baltimore 28th. We'll see if Baltimore's defense is real. Chicago 29th. At Packers 20th. At Seattle 17th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Week 14, Washington 27th. Week 15, Dallas 32nd. Week 16, Giants 21st. And then week 17, at home against Detroit 19th. So he doesn't have a top 15, top 16 matchup the rest of the season, although things changed with AFPA. But so there's reasons for optimism. He does run well. And if he can, like the weird thing to me is the 20 pass attempts in week 1 and 21 pass attempts in week 2. Like that's very low volume, very, very low volume. So that was surprising to me. And I wonder if they were trying to protect him and what they're going to do coming into a game in Detroit where they're going to have to throw more than that.
Should be interesting. We will keep an eye on him and see how well he plays, because that matters a lot for a couple guys that we would like to be starting in the wide receiver slots. Last bit of news before just some injuries to monitor. Dave Canales has said, after a couple weeks after saying that they were very happy with having their little committee and were committed to the committee, he has said, quote, that the Carolina cannot ignore the fact that Rico Dowdle has been exceptional, which of course has a lot of people wondering, are they going to start giving Rico Dowdle the vast majority of the workload here after being very split? They've paid Chuba, so this is kind of a strange situation, but then Dowdle had those unbelievable games when Hubbard was gone. For this week and rest of season, because people are, at that point where they're making moves to lock in their lineups down the stretch or their rosters down the stretch. What's your take on this situation?
Well, this quote, I think anybody with a logical type brain would read this quote and read into this and say, if we can't ignore it, must mean that they have to make a change of some sort. And that means Dowdle now is going to be the lead back versus Hubbard. And they've basically given Hubbard a couple weeks here to get back into the flow. And if you look at our running back by committee report last 2 weeks, it hasn't been pretty for Hubbard in terms of his rushing efficiency. 65 yards on 26 carries over the last 2 weeks. He has a touchdown. He has 2 catches for 24 yards, playing 55% of the snaps. Rico Dowdle behind the same offensive line, 25 carries, 133 yards. So basically doubling up his yards per carry. And this is not a shock because, I think, if you looked at this preseason, it would be kind of surprising because we kind of thought that Hubbard and Dowdle were similarly talented players. They did give Hubbard a nice contract. So it makes sense that they want him to be the lead back or give him every opportunity to get their money's worth. But given what Rico Dowdle did while Hubbard was out, this is not surprising that he's remained hot. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry, and they are actively hurting themselves every time they give Hubbard the ball and not Dowdle at this point, unless Hubbard gets it going, So to me, it's you feel a little more confident that Dowdle will be the lead back, or at least, maybe get 60% of touches and snaps, as opposed to the 55% snap, 42% snap share the last 2 weeks. I wouldn't count on it because their coaches say stuff and then don't follow through on it. But that certainly, that quote certainly indicates that he's talking about a change.
Would definitely give some credence to a tilted timeshare this next week, if it happens. It doesn't.
How about Hubbard to Kansas City?
Ooh, yes, I have heard that could be interesting. I've also heard Hubbard to New England because New England wants to get a running back, which I hate the idea of, but it could happen. Also, potentially Los Angeles, who wants to have 2 running backs and lost Najee Harris, and currently is without Omarion Hampton. There's a ton of fun trade stuff we could talk about. We're not here to do that. We're here to talk about database things mostly. Couple other injuries to monitor, just some quick hitters with your brief response. Cooper Kupp limited with a heel and hamstring situation. If he is out on a team where JSN's been getting a gazillion% target share, is there anyone else there you like as a streaming receiver?
You could throw a dart at or consider Torrey Horton a dart throw. He's got 29 fantasy points on the year, a couple touchdowns, I think. Maybe he gets a few extra targets if Kupp is out and some more consistent usage, but there's really nobody other than JSN and AJ Barner as a tight end streamer. There's nobody I have a lot of confidence with in Seattle.
Okay. In Houston, Woody Marks was added to the injury report on Thursday with a calf issue. We do not like hearing calves and hamstrings and heels and toes these times of year. Had been kind of up and down in recent weeks in terms of his usage, but if he is out, does Nick Chubb become a confident fantasy start, or is this mostly just a hands-off situation right
now? Nick Chubb becomes we have buys, we have roster holes. We need somebody that is going to get 10, 15 touches, and he's certainly one that would in that scenario. You might see Dare Ogunbowale and Damian Pierce rotate in, but Chubb would be the guy that would most likely get to 15 touches in that scenario.
And then last thing here, DeAndre Swift did not practice yesterday, Thursday. I have not seen something for today yet. He's been dealing with this groin issue, and he's been dealing it for a while and has played through it. However, this is worth noting because he usually had been limited on Thursday. So the DNP on Thursday raises a little bit of a red flag. We will see what the Friday report looks like. But if he were to miss against the dead last in AFPA against running backs, Bengals, Kyle Monangai would become RB what for you?
He'd be a top 15 play, I think, in this matchup.
Ooh.
I mean, Cincinnati 32nd adjusted fantasy point. You alluded to it. I think I wrote up Monangai as a sneaky start this week because this matchup is so good that even the backups might get there, might get 50 and a touchdown or 60 and a touchdown. And if there's any sort of setback, in-game setback, you have that sort of upside with, if Swift were to injure himself or if they were to ratchet back his touches because he's dinged up and just hand the ball to Monangai, all of a sudden you end up with the top 20 finish or something. So certainly he would move into the top 15, 20 if Swift were to be ruled out.
I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but I wrote this duo up for a bold prediction this week that Monangai would score 15 plus fantasy points while DeAndre Swift scored 25. And I think when I looked up the numbers, there had been 11 running backs the Bengals had allowed to score 15 plus fantasy points. I know for sure it was more than the games they had played. So they have been terrible and have allowed duos to both crush them a couple times this year. I think I agree Monangai is a sneaky start regardless and becomes a huge start if Swift misses the game. Okie dokie, let's go to the key matchups. Game of the week. This is an interesting one because I don't think we would have pinpointed these teams for game of the week at any point before the season, but I have Colts Steelers with the 50.5 point over under. The Colts defense is tough against running backs. They're 11th in AFPA, but they have been a very good fantasy matchup for the passing game. A lot of that comes from the fact that they score a gazillion points and force the other team to throw the ball. So for the Steelers, is Aaron Rodgers streamable for you? Where are you at with DK Metcalf, who it just feels like is not being used at the level that he should be? And do you like any other playable pass catchers there? And I assume Jaylen Warren is more or less a borderline must start for you. But general takeaways on Pittsburgh in this game.
Yeah, I saw your note on Metcalf, and I feel like he's been pretty good this year. And I'm looking at his game log, and I can see maybe you're thinking the yardage has been a little low for what it should be for his role in that offense, given they have no other reliable receivers. But 5 for 51 and a touchdown last week, 7 targets. He was kind of quiet and disappointing against Cincinnati, 3 for 50. Should do better in that one. But prior to that, 4 straight games with a touchdown. 95, 126, 32, and 20 yardage in those games. So I've got him ranked top 10 or 12 this week. I think it's a great matchup due to the likely volume. And you mentioned it. It's not so much that the Colts are bad against the pass. It's that teams have to throw against them because they're down by 20 points. Yep. The Indy offense has been fantastic. So I do agree. Metcalf to me is almost a must start. Aaron Rodgers is definitely streamable. Not going to get you much as a runner these days, but 2 touchdowns and 240 yards seems pretty likely or feasible this week in this game against the Colts. Anybody else? Keep an eye on Pat Freiermuth's injury. He was, I believe, a DNP Wednesday. If he's out, you're starting to look at Jonnu Smith as maybe a top 15, 20 tight end, although they do have Darnell Washington as well, who they can, kind of rotate in. But Freiermuth, looking at he's a full practice on Thursday, so he's going to be back. So you can disregard that Jonnu Smith recommendation. Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin III. I would have said with Austin back, given his hot start to the season, that okay, maybe he'll get back into that wide receiver 2 role. It does seem like Rodgers liked throwing to him, but then Roman Wilson had the best game of his career against the Packers. So I don't know. I don't really know who the wide receiver 2 is there. It's really only Rodgers streamable, DK almost a must play, Jalen Warren RB2, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, this a quick reminder, this is Arthur Smith, who this is more or less what he does. He is very frustrating outside of one or two players. Sometimes even those one or two players he becomes frustrating with. Such is life, unfortunately. But this should be a fun one for those players we can start. On the other side, so kind of similarly, the Steelers are okay against running backs. They're 15th in AFPA, but they are literally exactly 31st against quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends in AFPA. So we know we're starting Daniel Jones and we know we're starting Tyler Warren because those guys have been pretty great regardless and have a great matchup. But I am curious where you have the wide receiver group, who has been somewhat hit or miss largely, except for one guy who I think has been way better than everybody is giving him credit for, which is Michael Pittman Jr. Where do you have these guys falling for week 9?
Yeah, Pittman at wide receiver 15, so he's approaching must-start territory in this matchup against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a tendency to give up big plays, and I do think this might be an Alec Pierce game. He has been on the field quite a bit and is a big play guy. Had a good yardage game last week. Josh Downs did catch a touchdown coming off of the concussion, but it was 3 for 30 and a touchdown. So like, if not for the touchdown, it wouldn't have been that good of a fantasy day. But I think he had a touchdown before his concussion as well. So he is startable as well. I have Pierce at 37.5 PPR, Downs at 39. I know that raises some eyebrows, but I do think that Pierce's like yardage and role have been more consistent, and I think he is probably more due for a monster game. And there could be a big game this week against this defense that tends to give up giant chunks of yardage in the passing game.
Yeah, I like it. All right, fade of the week. It is the Broncos and the Texans, which should not be all that surprising. These are two of by far the best defenses in the league. Over-under is a 39.5. It is worth noting the Broncos will be without Pat Surtain, who is injured and is going to be out a few weeks, most likely. So curious to see how much that will affect things for that defense. But on the season, the Broncos are 13th against running backs, but they are top 6 against every other position. QBs, receivers, tight ends. The passing games have been horrible against them with Pat Surtain. So again, the qualifier. Does that matter a lot to you? And if so, or if not, who are you willing to start for Houston, who has largely been a team full of I don't knows outside of maybe Nico Collins?
Well, I'm looking at the fantasy points per route covered numbers for Denver, and Jaquan McMillan in the slot, stingy, very stingy. Riley Moss, who moves back and forth and might end up shadowing Nico, pretty stingy. And then Chris Abrams, drain. I don't know what that is. I'm not big on the cornerback depth charts, but it appears that I'm guessing he's the one stepping in here for Pat Surtain. He's yielding 0.71 fantasy points per route run, which is the highest on the chart that I can see. So that is a nice matchup for whoever's drawing him. So I think the Surtain to Abrams drain swap will be significant for Houston. And if they can pick on this guy, Nico, Xavier Hutchinson, probably, because Christian Kirk plays mostly in the slot. Those guys will be able to make some plays. So this is definitely good if you're a Nico Collins enthusiast, which I am. I'm starting him this week. This is good that Surtain's going to be sitting. Very good.
And he is cleared from concussion protocol, by the way. So full go for all you Nico Collins managers. No interest in CJ Stroud. Except maybe
I think you're probably not excited to roll him out there. I think there are probably some teams that might need to. And with Surtain out, like if Surtain was playing, I'd be like, yeah, just stay away from this. But with Surtain out, I think will be some opportunities for Stroud.
Okay, other side of the ball, the Houston defense, which is not missing their shutdown, lockdown, all-pro corner. They are first against quarterbacks and wide receivers in AFPA and are also top 10 against running backs and tight ends. This defense has been horrid to play against with your fantasy options. Dobbins, you figure is a must start here. RJ Harvey had been picking up some work, but don't know if you can play him. And then you Sutton, Cortland Sutton has been the clear number one, so maybe you have to start him. I'm curious if you even think that. And then is anybody else interesting here?
Yeah, I think Sutton's going to get shadowed by Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley's been pretty good. And then Troy Franklin in the slot he has a neutral matchup. He could poke his head up. It looks like Marvin Mims is going to be out, so Pat Bryant's going to play. You're not running out trying to play these Denver receivers. You might have to based on your roster construction, and these aren't like terrible matchups, but they're not really favorable, juicy matchups either. I mean, you could look at Franklin. He's coming off a 2-touchdown day. You could argue that he could start. Sutton is like ranked probably 8 to 10 spots lower than he normally would be given the matchup with Stingley.
Yeah. And then I think it's worth hitting on because a lot of people with Bo Nix on their rosters are super excited after the last couple of weeks. 39.96 fantasy points, 24.78 fantasy points these last couple of weeks. But those games came against the Giants and the Cowboys, who are not very good on defense. And the Texans are, for anyone who thinks they need to put Bo Nix on the lineup based off those two games, how far is he falling down for you against this defense? And is he still starting?
Yeah, when I ran projections and just the over-unders and then the Houston, what they're allowing and everything, they're first in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. So Bo Nix is coming in at QB 21. Now you could make the argument that maybe you start him over Trevor Lawrence or Sam Darnold, Aaron Rodgers, who have better matchups. But he's right there with Stroud for me. I mean, they're okay quarterbacks to good when matchups are favorable, but in these two matchups, it's pretty ugly.
Youch. I fully agree. However, I actually wrote Bo Nix up as a bust this week. If you look at his game log, he had those two games against very terrible defenses. His one other great game this year was against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are also a very bad defense. And against all the good defenses, he's been kind of meh. So this is the best defense by far against a position I'm very concerned about playing him and would try to avoid it if you can. Speaking of quarterback matchups, let's hit the positional matchups of note, and then we will get to Q&A. On the good side, several interesting names here. Kyler Murray, who has been, I would say, very disappointing this fantasy season, but he gets the Dallas Cowboys, who are dead last in AFPA. That's pretty beautiful. Caleb Williams gets the Bengals. We just talked about them. Also very bad. Joe Flacco, if he's healthy, and I have not seen the most recent news on him, but he was banged up. He gets the Bears, who are 29th in AFPA, and Sam Darnold, who you just mentioned as an option over Bo Nix. He gets the Commanders, who are 27th. Most of these guys, streamers, Kyler Murray, was drafted to be better than that, but are all these guys starter worthy this week?
Yeah, Kyler Murray was one where you plug in the line and the total, and the Cowboys' bad defensive numbers, and all into our equations at 4 for 4, and he comes in the top 5. I've got him at QB 6. Kyler Murray. You cannot ask for a better get-right game coming off of your 1-game hiatus, or what was it, 2-game? I don't know how long it was, a couple of weeks with the foot injury. If he's good to go and he's normal, Kyler Murray, he should have a very nice game against the Cowboys. He's actually been okay. He does not have a game with fewer than 14 fantasy points in 5. He hasn't scored more than 18.3 either. So he's been in this very consistent 14 to 18 range, thanks to 30, 40 yards rushing every game, and usually a touchdown or 2 passing. So this is one where he should get to 200 yards, maybe more, 250 in passing, should have a couple of touchdowns passing, and maybe has another 40 yards rushing. And who knows, if he scores a rushing touchdown as well, he could end up with 30 fantasy points. But I would expect at least 18 to 20 for him this week in this fine matchup. These other guys, Caleb on paper is a good start, but he has been very up and down with his actual fantasy production. I worry about him a little bit. He did kind of come in the top 10, and I don't feel like I would rather start Jordan Love this week. Just the caliber of play that Jordan Love is at right now. But I do think there is a big game potentially for Caleb Williams if things go well. But this is also like the Bears have not shown that they are going to make sure that Caleb gets his numbers. They're happy if they're getting it through the running game, and we know Cincinnati's bad rush defense. I would not be shocked if he has 180 yards passing, no touchdowns, and it's all Monangai or Swift. Now it could go the other way as well, but I just don't think that they are necessarily okay. We got to get Caleb a couple touchdowns this game or anything like that. I think they're just happy to win however they can win. Darnold is a good start against Washington. He's been really consistent this year, except for week 1. And then Flacco, obviously against Chicago, he's played really well with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and has, injected the Bengals offense with some life. But we'll see if he's healthy.
Yep. On the bad side, honestly, not very many relevant for our usual conversations matchups, because the only guys that are even mildly benchable with bad matchups this week are Justin Herbert against the Titans, who are 7th in AFPA, and Drake May against the Falcons, who are 5th. But both those guys feel like very nearly, if not already, must starts. Do you disagree with that at all? Anybody in the above list you would start over them?
No, I would agree with that, because Herbert I got at 4, May at 7, and we talked about the guys that have bad matchups that we should probably bench, and that's Stroud and Nix, I think.
Yep.
Cam Ward, but I mean, who's starting Cam Ward unless you're in a 2-3 quarterback league? So yeah, I would agree those guys are pretty much, May and Herbert are scoring at such a level that they're pretty much must starts regardless of matchup.
All right, on the running back front, speaking of the Chargers and the Titans, Kimani Vidal will face Tennessee, who are 31st in AFP, and he has been quite good filling in as a starter. I've mentioned DeAndre Swift earlier. He and Monangai get the Bengals, who are dead last. Whoever's playing there, you're feeling good about. And then Tyrone Tracy, who you hit on as an RB2. His matchup's not bad against the 49ers, who were 23rd. Bam Knight in Arizona, who should be the starter this week, gets the Cowboys, who are 30th. And we touched on Kareem Hunt, but just a reminder, the Bills are 27th in AFPA against running backs, have typically been very soft. Of that group, who are the ones you like best, or where are you falling on those?
Yeah, Vidal is at 11. I wrote up Tyrone Tracy and Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, and Kareem Hunt for sneaky starts. I think they all qualify. I'm starting Knight in a couple of leagues thanks to the matchup. The Michael Carter thing is a little weird. They cut him, and everybody was like, oh, okay, so, DeMercado's back or Trey Benson's close, and then they just re-signed Carter to the practice squad, and he's probably going to be elevated and be playing a role. Apparently he was back in front of the running back drills even after all this. So Knight was up there with him, but it looks like Knight, based on what we saw earlier last few weeks, Knight will be the lead back with Carter in a kind of a passing down role. We'll see DeMercado's been injured, so we'll see. He had his amazing near touchdown run, and then fumbled the ball. He's the most explosive back here, and I would love to see him get a chance at 15 touches, but I don't see it happening right now. But I think Knight of the three is certainly the one you would want to have in lineups this week, given the matchup against Dallas.
On the bad side of running back matchups, I want to hit on this one first and separately, because I'm curious where you stand. Ashton Genty gets the Jaguars. They are 7th in AFPA against running backs. Where are you at with Ashton Genty in general? Because I've heard some people say, oh, the Raiders figured out how to use him, and he's had a couple good games lately. I think he's going to be great. And then others have said, this offense is just too bad for him to ever be a star. Is he an RB1 rest of the season for you? Is he an RB2? And where does he fall in this week particularly?
The Raiders have been, I'm just looking at their team numbers. They've been hovering around 4 yards per carry, 94 rushing yards. Jacksonville's been pretty good. They're 27th in rushing yards allowed at 91. Again, 3.9 yards per carry. The thing about Genty that keeps him in the high-end RB2 is that he's just dominating this backfield and should see like all the yardage and all the touches. So if he's getting 70, 80% of 90 yards, that's pretty good volume. And and then he's getting some catches too, and he's going to get any rushing touchdowns that there are. So he's just a volume back right now in a bad matchup, but you still a guy getting that kind of workload. I have him ahead of a guy like Jalen Warren, Travis Etienne, who are kind of splitting backfields a bit more than Genty is, and don't necessarily have great matchups, but they have kind of middling matchups. So I think Genty at RB 14, I think that's a fair ranking for him. Most people are going to want to start him this week.
All right. Then elsewhere on the bad side, Alvin Kamara, who has not been good already, gets the Rams, who are second in AFPA. I am curious if you're just moving on entirely from Kamara at this point. The Panthers backfield gets Green Bay, who are third in AFPA. We talked about the split above. The first matchup they have in this maybe Rico Dowdle era is against a very tough defense. So curious how that will pan out. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, it's been disappointing, I think, is the best way to characterize him and the fantasy hype he's had. He gets the Seahawks, who were 10th in AFPA. And then I am interested to hear your thoughts on the Vikings backfield, which was terrible in Aaron Jones' return last week. And they get the Lions, who are fourth in AFPA.
Yeah, so Kamara, you're just sort of banking on 10 to 15 touches with 3 or 4 catches. He hasn't, we don't know what the new quarterback's going to do there in terms of dump offs and whether or not they're going to, Tyler Shuck is going to, get him back to his 5 catches a game type workload, because that would really help him, I think, and help the offense. So I've got him ranked at 21, but you could argue that Kareem Hunt should maybe go over him. Rico Dowdle, with the news that, he might be the lead back, could be ranked ahead of him. Krosky-Merritt has been the primary back for Washington, but and I'm blanking. I mean, Jeremy McNichols has actually looked a little bit more spry. Seattle has got the best rush defense in the league, 3.3 yards per carry allowed, 76 yards per game. So I'm not expecting either one of those players to do very well. But in a short week, you've got JCM as a high-end RB3. And then your final bad matchup was who?
Vikings. Aaron Jones
and
Jordan Mason.
Yeah. So Jones came back, and that was negative game script for the Vikings. We don't know exactly what they want to do if they're in a game, but I think we're also going to see negative game script this week with Detroit. So it's probably going to be an Aaron Jones game, being on the field in a pass catching role with a few carries here and there. I've got him at 30, and I've got Mason at 36. So it's not pretty right now for the Vikings running backs.
Do either of those guys crack your RB2 rankings rest of season, or are we just kind of out in no man's land with them?
No, I think we're probably with those two looking at RB3 rankings, because they're basically in a timeshare, and it's going to be sort of like Aaron Jones is at 35, Mason right now at 28, but that's probably a little too aggressive for Mason given what we saw last week. And if this team's not good, I don't know if we're going to be in a not good situation all the time. I think if they're leading or if they're in neutral, then Mason might end up seeing more carries than Jones, but I don't know that the snaps are going to be enough to get him, into RB2 rankings anymore because of the role that Jones has.
Feel like McCarthy could have a big impact on this, so we will see what version of him we get in his return. At the wide receiver position, Marvin Harrison Jr. gets the Cowboys, who are dead last in AFP against wide receivers, and he has not been good. And you usually have to be a somewhat fringy player to make this section of the podcast. The fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is here is kind of an indictment on how his season has gone. But I'm curious if you think he'll have a breakout game here against the Cowboys. The Jacksonville group gets the Raiders. We don't know who's going to play or be healthy, but this is a nice matchup for those guys we talked about. So I'd be curious if you'd be willing to play any. And then Jordan Addison, obviously you're starting Justin Jefferson. But worth noting that Jordan Addison gets the Lions, who are 28th in AFPA. A lot of that is what you pointed to earlier with the game script. Even with McCarthy there, or maybe especially with McCarthy there, is he a must-start option in this matchup?
Yeah, I have Addison pretty high relative to consensus. Well, he came in initially at like 18. I've got him at
Ooh.
26 right now, but I'm looking at these guys ahead of him: Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, Debo Samuel. I mean, you could make the argument you might want to start Addison with the way he's played, but I think the one concern there is we have a new quarterback and we really haven't seen Addison with him yet. So that's the concern with him. Harrison has been up and down, I would say. I don't think he's been terrible. He had a 5 for 71 opener with a touchdown. In week 4, he had 6 for 66 and a touchdown on 10 targets against Seattle. He had 4 for 98 the following game against Tennessee. The volume has been kind of low, but also we've had some problems with the quarterback situation there with Jacoby Brissett in. So I think he's a top 20, 22 receiver this week, given the matchup. Like if he's available, which I think he's coming off of a concussion, but it looks like he's practicing. He's practicing in full. I don't see him on the injury report. So he should be good to go. And I would, if I had him, I'd probably be starting him given the, a few teams on bye.
Makes sense. On the bad side, the Patriots wide receivers get the Falcons, who are 8th in AFPA. And that group has been kind of hard to predict. I've sort of started calling them the Packers of the AFC because they have a number of guys who pop their heads up, but none of them have been incredibly consistent. The Bills wide receivers, sort of a similar situation. They get the Chiefs, who are 3rd in AFPA, been very tough, and there has not been much to trust in that Buffalo receiver room. And then the Packers themselves, the Packers of the NFC, that group gets the Panthers, who are 6th in AFPA. Often a game script related thing as well. You expect the Packers to win this one by a lot. Is there anyone you feel great about in any of these wide receiver rooms?
Great about? No. Diggs is interesting because he's Stephon Diggs. Boutte if you have a tough week in terms of you want to plug him in there. He's got touchdown upside. It does seem like Drake May likes to look at him in the red zone. Stephon Diggs only has the 1 touchdown this year, and it was last week. Diggs was having a little moment: 6 for 101 on 7 and week 4, 10 for 146 on 12 against his old team. Then against New Orleans, 3 for 28. Tennessee, 7 for 69, so it's pretty good in PPR. And then 3 for 14 and a touchdown against Cleveland, a good defense. So, Atlanta, good defense. You're probably, looking at a lower yardage game for Diggs, but he might get you 6 or 7 catches. He might end up in the end zone. I think those two are probably startable, depending on your situation. Khalil Shakir has been solid for Buffalo. I don't know that it's not a great matchup for him, but he's in the slot. He's up against Chow Smith-Wade in the slot, who's been stingy against receivers. So you're just kind of banking on his rapport with Josh Allen and maybe some comeback negative game script type volume for him. Joshua Palmer's out as well. I saw that. So, maybe Keon Coleman pops his head up in a dart throw wide receiver 4 sort of scenario. And then for the Packers, I don't know that Matthew Golden's going to happen soon. I don't know that's going to happen ever. I don't know. We'll see. Christian Watson comes back. Yep. And I mean, it might be next year, or it might be when this wide receiver core kind of thins out a little bit, and maybe he develops a little bit to get more consistent targets. But Christian Watson comes back immediately, leads the team in yardage. And it does seem like Jordan Love has more confidence in throwing it to Watson right now than he does to Golden. Dobbs is probably the highest ranked weekly right now because he does have that touchdown upside. If they hand it to Josh Jacobs and he doesn't get in the end zone the first couple of tries down there, then they will maybe throw it to Dobbs or to Tucker Kraft. So that's kind of where we're at with them. And it's, you can't expect so much. You can't expect too much from the Packer receivers. You're just hoping that one of them has their day.
And that you picked the right one of them. On the tight end front, good matchups. Kyle Pitts gets the Patriots, who were interestingly 28th in AFPA against tight ends. He was limited on Thursday with an ankle injury, so we'll need to monitor that and what he does today to know if we can start him. But that he's been quietly, or maybe not so quietly, pretty decent. Zach Ertz gets the Seahawks. They're 29th in AFPA. He's been spottily good. And then the Bears tight ends, I mainly put this in here if Cole Kmet is out, but he's been practicing in a limited fashion. So he might be back, which would make Colston Loveland less exciting. But if he is out, or maybe even if they're both out, this team faces the Cincinnati Bengals. And we've talked about how bad their defense is. It is next level bad against the tight end position. They are working on setting records against this team. They've allowed 18.3 adjusted fantasy points per game. The next highest at second is 16.1, and the median in the league is around 10. So they have been unbelievable to target. Between this crew, are there any you are excited to get into lineups this week or willing to?
Yeah, let's start with the Bears. I've got Colson Loveland at 16, and that assumes Kmet plays. Kmet's at 29. But it's just it's a hopeful projection.
Sure.
Colson Loveland has done like next to nothing this year, the entire year. And it's really concerning, I guess, or I don't know if it's concerning is the right word. They drafted him over Tyler Warren. It doesn't look like it was a great decision, but maybe that's just the way they want to use their tight ends in Chicago right now, or where, Loveland has more long-term potential, or, whatever they're thinking there when they made that draft pick. You are saying to yourself, this is a stoppable force against a movable object, and the stoppable force is going to win out and become unstoppable against Cincinnati. I would rather start AJ Barner. And that might be controversial because he doesn't get a lot of targets, 3.2 targets, but he's going to get some red zone looks. Washington is a good matchup for tight ends as well. He's already got 4 touchdowns, I think. So he's just done way more than Loveland has to this point. And with Cooper Kupp banged up, Barner is more appealing to me as well. Getting back to your other guys, yes, Kyle Pitts. I think with the Darnell Mooney sort of struggles, he has been quietly good. It certainly helped last week that Drake London was out. I don't think you can expect a high target floor if London is back, and he's limited the first 2 days this week. Pitts is also limited Wednesday and Thursday, so just kind of keep an eye on that. But he's a low-end tight end 1 right now, Kyle Pitts. And I think Zach Ertz also is a low-end tight end 1 with McLaurin out, and Jaden Daniels back in. You've got Deebo Samuel there and some goofballs at receiver that you can't count on. Luke McCaffrey, Chris Moore, right? Jalen Lane. So I think Zach Ertz becomes pretty intriguing there as a tight end streamer against Seattle, who are 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position.
Like it. On the bad side, Aronde Gadsden gets the Titans. I am curious. I'm very curious to hear whether you think he is matchup proof yet. They're 5th in AFPA, so it's not like it's the end of the world, but they have been very good. Travis Kelce gets the Bills. They have been the end of the world for most of the year. They're 2nd in AFPA, but Kelce has kind of been picking it up lately, or at least last week. Certainly, he looked very good. Dalton Kincaid on the other side of that same game, he gets the Chiefs, who are 4th in AFPA. And then Hunter Henry, if you're still holding on for hope with Hunter Henry, who started the season hot, he gets the Falcons, who are 1st in AFPA and have been monstrous, as good as the Bengals have been against, or bad, I guess, against tight ends. The Falcons have been that good. 3.7 fantasy points per game to tight ends in total. That's disgusting. So of this group, do you feel confident about the first 3 and throwing Hunter Henry out, or do you have any different thoughts?
I think they're all startable. Aronde Gadsden is a must start for me. He's matchup proof for me in Scott Fishbowl. I'm never benching him again after benching him, and he had 50 points in that game, and I lost my game and lost 4 spots in the standings because I was an idiot and got way too cute. He is locked in my lineup. He's never moving. Even for his bye. I don't know when his bye is, if it's already happened, but he's going to be in there for my bye. He might score 50 on my bye. Yeah, I think he really needs to have a stretch of quiet games to bench him. But he's on a run right now, and I wouldn't mess with it. Travis Kelce is playing pretty well as well, and it is a bad matchup against Buffalo, but it's Travis Kelce. This could be a high-scoring game. It also could be a game where the Chiefs find themselves in negative game script for the first time in a while. They have to throw the ball. So I think he's a pretty solid low-end tight end 1. Kincaid is a little, again, Buffalo could find themselves in the negative game script with Josh Allen having to throw more. But Kincaid is not as big of a part of the offense as Kelce has been. but I think he is certainly startable as a low end. I've got him at tight end 10. And Henry, I thought you were a little hard on him, but I guess he has been a little bit quiet lately. He did have the touchdown last week, but prior to that, 33 yards, 27 yards, 46 yards. But then he had, prior to that, 3 touchdowns in 2 games. He's a guy that can explode in any given game. I don't know that this is the week for it, but he does have some, and I would hold on to him if you have any sort of tight end issues, because he's got Tampa 20th in AFPA, Jets 21st, Bengals 32nd, and Giants 17th coming up the next 4 games. So he could get it going. He's had a rough stretch of games with 4 red matchups, including this week in the last 5 games.
Yeah. You can expect 20 fantasy points in that Bengals game for Hunter Henry. Put it down now. All right, let's get to the Q&A before we wrap up this Halloween episode. Samuel Burks, always hanging. Interestingly, this question came in right when you were talking about these exact 2 guys in the rankings, but I decided to save it anyways. I picked up Tyrone Tracy and traded him for Travis Etienne in a PPR league. Was that a smart move, I think is what he meant, with Tracy's history?
I'm curious as to. I think it's fine. I have him a few spots ahead of Tracy, Travis Etienne. I think maybe Etienne is a little more vulnerable with Tootin there as the RB2 versus Tracy and Devin Singletary. Like, I think I'd be more worried about Tootin, getting an increased workload or looking better than Etienne for a stretch than I am with Tracy and Singletary. I could be mistaken about that, but I would have Etienne just in a vacuum ahead of Tracy.
Worth noting on Etienne, because I think a lot of Etienne managers are probably disappointed in how he's played the last few weeks after a strong month to start the season. His 3 matchups going into the bye, which was last week: Chiefs 6th in AFPA, Seahawks 10th in AFPA, Rams 2nd in AFPA, still haven't allowed a single touchdown to the running back position, a rushing touchdown at least. It was a horrible stretch for him. This week's matchup is much softer in the Raiders, and then the Texans are tough, but after that, he doesn't have a top 10 matchup again. So I think he's sneakily going to be better down the stretch than he has been this last stretch. VBZ2X. We hit on this duo a little bit, but got Aaron Jones, but someone dropped Jordan Mason. What do I do? And I think this is a valid sort of perspective on the situation, is that people are now dropping Jordan Mason. Are you dropping Jordan Mason? And if someone is dropping Jordan Mason, you have Aaron Jones, are you specifically going out and trying to pick him up?
These questions are tough for me because I don't know your league. Sure. I am not in any leagues where I would be dropping a player of the caliber of Jordan Mason, who's 1 injury away from an aging running back to being back into the RB2 rankings. It's just, I guess my benches are too big. I don't play in these leagues where you've only got 5 bench spots, or it's a 10-team league or anything like that. So I just can't relate, I guess, is my issue with that. To answer your question, it depends on what else do you have going on with your roster. I have no problem with you having the 2 Minnesota running backs. They're not going to be useful really on a weekly basis unless you sort of know what the game script's going to be. And if it's a big favorite, you might want to run Mason out there in your RB3-2 flex spot. If it's a game like this week where they're a touchdown underdog on the road against Detroit, you may want to run Jones out there, especially if it's a PPR formats. But if Mason is available, and who are you cutting to get him? Because it might just be in a vacuum. Yes, Mason's more valuable than this other player. And then you're also giving yourself a chance, if one of these 2 guys goes down, of having the clear, far and away RB1 for the Vikings.
Worth noting on the matchups front, obviously we talked about this week they get the Lions, very tough. Next week they get the Ravens, who, if they have indeed fixed their run defense a bit, will not be as soft a matchup as they look like, and you would imagine the Vikings will be in a negative game script against Lamar Jackson's version of the Ravens. And then the Bears is a soft matchup in Week 11. They're 26th in AFPA. That's a game the Vikings could be in, but after that, it's kind of tough for a stretch. A lot of red, a lot of games are likely to be, not in the most positive game script. So it's a tough situation there. This is an interesting question from Chester. It's not a straight up start this guy or this guy question, so I think it's worth looking at and answering. Need a sleeper wide receiver with Ibuka on bye, Brian Thomas Jr. questionable, and Hunter just got placed on IR. 75 question marks after that. I can tell you right away the best place to look is the Sneaky Starts article. But, John, now that we have this here on the pod, who are your favorites that he might be able to get? Oh,
I don't know who's available on your waiver wire, but if you're looking for someone to pick up and start, I'm sure I would think Diami Brown and or Parker Washington would be available. I lean Parker Washington because he did see the 10 targets, I think, last game. But I do think Diami Brown's snaps are going to increase more with the Travis Hunter. I think the Hunter increase in snaps, 87% snaps prior to the bye, came at Diami Brown's expense. So I really don't have a strong call as to which one of these guys is going to. One of them will probably have a good game, and I don't have a strong call as to which one. Washington did see 10 targets prior to the bye, so I just lean that way, but it's just a very slight lean. Chimere DK might be available on the waiver wire. He's had a couple of good games in a row. Other than that, I'm like scrolling up the rankings, and I don't think a lot of these guys would be available. Alec Pierce, maybe he might have a big game. He might be available on the waiver wire. Troy Franklin probably is not. Going down the list of rankings, you're getting into the Alec Manor realm of things. Christian Watson, Calvin Austin. I don't know. These guys are uninspiring dart throws. So, if you're looking for somebody that probably benefits directly from the Hunter absence, it's probably going to be either Washington or Brown. One of those two, probably your best bets if a DK is not available. Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton might be available. Yeah, he's a good start.
That is also a nice way to do it, is to get the Jaguars guy, because then when your Jaguars are back and healthy, you don't feel too bad about dropping these guys. Daniel Quintanilla. Hey, guys. PPR, a standard league? Don't know what that means. PPR. Let's go with PPR. Got offered Stephon Diggs for Jalen Warren. So he has Jalen Warren. Someone is offering Stephon Diggs. Wants to counter with sending Jalen Warren and Khalil Shakir to get Ladd McConkey instead. On the roster, Cortland Sutton, Juwan Jennings, Terry McLaurin, Woody Marks, Kyron Williams, Ashton Genty, Tony Pollard, and Trey Benson. The running back depth is there to make this kind of move, and the wide receiver depth is not there.
I think McConkey's coming on. We're starting to see advancement or the continuation of what he did as a rookie. He's moved himself back into the number one role. Will that continue? Probably. Not for sure. They do have a really talented group of receivers there, and Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen have earned targets in the past. Now they've also got a good tight end. So I mean, it's not a no-brainer. I think it's a fair offer because Jalen Warren's kind of a low-end RB2. Khalil Shakir has been like a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2. And you're looking at Ladd and you're hoping that he's a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1. He may not pan out, but I think that's a fair trade.
Yeah, I like your version as well. I would not take the first version. I'm not super stoked about Stephon Diggs, especially I think any trade rumors with the Patriots are more fan based than team based. The true reports for the team is that they're looking at a running back and probably a defensive front player. But either way, Diggs has not been getting consistent enough production for me to really be too excited. So I like your version much better and think that's worth pulling the trigger on. Coastal Elite says, drop any of Keenan, DK, Myers, or DJ Moore for Mooney rest of season in half PPR.
I have to look at exactly where I've got Mooney relative to those guys.
I don't have rest of season rankings, but just off the cuff, this does not feel great to me, but I'm curious to see where they fall for you.
I guess I've got, I'm still not completely sold on DK.
Fair.
Maybe he should be a bit higher than where I've got him. Because he has had a couple good games in a row, but it is the Panthers offense. Or I'm sorry, the Titans offense, and Calvin Ridley may be back at some point. And where does that leave us?
Mhm.
But I kind of value him a bit more, or about the same as Ayo Manor right now. But I have Mooney ahead of that. But Mooney doesn't seem like, I'm not excited about those two, any of those guys that we just discussed. But so I would have. I'm definitely not cutting Keenan.
No.
And I'm holding out some hope for DJ Moore. He does seem to be doing a little bit better since the bye. Myers, you probably want to hold through the trade if it happens, the trade deadline, just to see if that happens. So to me, it's really a decision between DK and Mooney. Who do you think has more upside rest of the season? Mooney's far more proven, but he has been pretty quiet. And he had a great opportunity with London out last week, and just with a quarterback that he was used to, and didn't hardly do anything. So it's not like it's encouraging usage or production from him.
Yeah, I almost kind of feel like the devil we know versus the devil we don't in this situation is bad for Mooney, because what we know of him right now is just that he's not really doing all that much. And while we don't know much about DK or what we can really expect rest of season, that there is an upside there that we don't know about that would be much higher than Mooney's theoretically, because he could be the wide receiver one there. There's also been some Calvin Ridley trade rumors. I don't know if that'll happen, but that would open a large door for DK. So I would agree. I don't think I'd drop any of these guys for Mooney. Last question. This is just the most fitting question. I feel like we ask this question. I ask you this question maybe once a month, because everybody in fantasy wants to know the answer, and you are probably the best positioned player or person in the fantasy community to answer it, because you are a Packers fan and also, the GOAT. How do you value the Green Bay wide receivers? This is Jamal Anifawoshe, I think. How do you value the Green Bay wide receivers rest of season? There are so many, and the Packers hardly throw, and Kraft is there. You hit on this briefly, most specifically with this week, but down the stretch, like, who is rosterable? Who do you feel confident about starting often? How does this fall out for you?
Okay, so I think the best, most talented player is Jaden Reed, and he's also the most valuable fantasy asset when he is healthy, but he's not healthy. So he's just sort of in IR spots right now. He might be languishing on the waiver wire, sitting on benches, and you're sort of waiting for him to come back. I don't know that he's going to come back after this long layoff and immediately get back to his production that he had the last two seasons. He was basically a low-end wide receiver too, fantasy-wise, and it wasn't consistent, but if you look at his end of season numbers, he was a low-end wide receiver too, thanks to some carries and thanks to a lot of production in the passing game, but it wasn't always consistent. The thing that's happening is, well, number one, Matt LaFleur does not care about your fantasy team. He does not care about getting any one player any number of targets in any given week. He does not have those types of players. He does not have a Devontae Adams in his prime on his roster. He's got 4, 5, 6 guys that he's got a lot of confidence in. He wants to give everybody a chance to make some plays. He wants everybody excited and get some snaps and be involved. And he wants to keep the defense off kilter. So that in itself, if you have Reed and you have a healthy Dobbs and you have a healthy Watson and you have a healthy Gordon, that just lends itself to just draft these guys in best ball and avoid it. Probably, unless maybe Reed, if he's having a good season, is fully healthy, like you can count on him in regular redraft. But on top of this, we have Tucker Kraft emerging as perhaps one of the next elite top tier tight end playmaker, yak guy, George Kittle-esque in his prime, Gronk-esque in his prime type players. And Matt LaFleur signaled this to us a bit in the offseason, where he said, I did not do a good enough job featuring the tight ends. And I don't know if it was you or who else I was talking to, and it was he might be meaning Luke Musgrave, because that's how he operates. It does appear that he was talking about Tucker Kraft. He does realize that Tucker Kraft needs the ball, can win in man. There are no linebackers. There are very few linebackers or safeties or cornerbacks that can cover him in man. And he's just a dangerous weapon and needs the ball. So that lends itself now to him getting consistent targets and no one else really getting consistent targets. They're going to take some deep shots with Watson and Golden here and there. Dobbs is the short yardage possession guy, possibly some red zone work for him, but that's not even consistent because he's probably the third option now in the red zone after Jacobs and Kraft. So you don't have anybody that's you're super confident about. You have guys that you can plug in on bye weeks, and you're hoping for the best because the offense is pretty good. And you're hoping it's that week where maybe Dobbs gets 3 touchdowns or gets 1 touchdown. But this is how it's going to be, I think, every year, unless for some reason the receiver room thins out there and they start to give these guys 80% snaps plus a minimum of 4 or 5, 6 targets a game.
Usually in these kinds of situations, what we end up saying is just play the quarterback, draft the quarterback and play the quarterback. I would like to ask a question to John Paulson before we sign off of where you stand on Jordan Love for fantasy, because he seems like a very good NFL quarterback. He's efficient, but if you look at his game log, he has 3 great games. They came against the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Steelers, who are all terrible against the quarterback position. This is very similar to, who was I talking about before? Was it Bo Nix? He's been very good against bad matchups, and then kind of middling against middling or even not great against tough matchups. Is he a good fantasy quarterback? Do you feel confident about him as your QB1, or is he someone you more want to have in like a streaming duo?
Well, to be confident in a player as my QB1, he would need to be higher than, QB 11 year to date, which is what he is. I'm confident in him when he's got matchups that are favorable. You said it right there. Like, he does it. Like, I like guys that are predictable. So
true.
If it's a good matchup, you run him out there. Kyler Murray in a good matchup, I like to run him out there. So I've got one league where I've got Love, Murray. I'm carrying 3 quarterbacks, and that's usually not what you want to do, but I'm waiting for somebody to give me an offer. I got Caleb Williams, Murray, and Love in that league, and I'm just basically running the best matchup out there. And everybody's been predictable except for Caleb. Love and Murray have been pretty predictable so far. So yeah, you mentioned it. 11 points against Cleveland, not a shocker. 15 against Cincinnati. That is kind of a surprise. I mean, that was one of his lower games. This is Jordan Love I'm talking about. And Arizona, kind of a middling defense. He only had 13.4. None of these are killing you, but he's not winning you these weeks. You might end up losing the week because he didn't do enough. But I think, this game against Pittsburgh was a big deal for him. I think I wrote in Sneaky Starts that it could be a career-defining game for him. To go in there and play against his old mentor and just light him up and go nuts, basically. He's running the ball more this year than he had in years past. So he's had about an 18-yard floor. He didn't run it against Pittsburgh, but he had 18 yards in 4 straight games, which gives him a little bit of more of a floor. And then you have the matchups coming up, which mostly are favorable. Carolina, we'll see what happens. He usually does throw a couple touchdowns at home. Philly at home. Then he's got Giants, Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, all 14th or worse in AFPA. In week 15, he's got Denver. Probably not going to want to start him at Denver. But then he's got Chicago and the Baltimore in week 16 and 17. We'll see what defenses show up by then, where they're at AFPA wise, but those are very bright green matchups right now. So rest of the season, I think he's a low end QB1, and he's a great member of a committee to where you can run out there, when they have a high total. Also, Josh Jacobs is getting a little dinged up. So one wonders if they're going to start to let him cook a bit more, Jordan Love, and throw it on first down a little bit more, because they've been pretty predictable in terms of how much they want to establish the run week to week.
Love it. The nice thing about being a 4for4 fan is you can go onto the website and you can search quarterbacks and you can see their full strength of schedule laid out with the AFPA for each team. And you can say, who should I pair with Jordan Love that might be on the waiver wire to throw out there in his tougher matchups. It's just a brilliant little strategy. So do that. Any closing thoughts or things to share before we sign off for week 9 and the Halloween festivities, John?
Yes, I would like to mention a couple of things. The Halloween sale is active right now. The light sale is $9. Pro is $14. Rest of season. DFS is $24. Rest of season. John 25 will get you 25% off. YouTube might also get you 25% off. And then we're also doing a promo with SharpStack. If you want to try it out, it's our new betting EV tool. It's really cool. Identifies sharp wagers. That's what, hence the name SharpStack. We're doing you get free 7 days, and then you can get the first month for $10 instead of $129. So you're getting basically 5 weeks for $10. Good deal there. John NBA will get you a additional deal there, I think. I think YouTube might as well. So check those out, and especially if you're a bettor, check out get the free 5 weeks of SharpStack for $10 and see if you like it, because I've been using it for my prop bets at Prize Picks. They've also got market-based projections, which are really cool. Which are cool to look at if you have some tough decisions and don't like my projection on your players for some reason. But yeah, check those out. We're running a couple of good sales right now.
Great stuff. All righty. We will sign off there. Happy Halloween to everyone. May you have many treats and no tricks, specifically and especially in your fantasy lineups. And we will be back after the halfway point of the season. Good gracious, how has this happened already? Next week. Adios. See you then.